when I'm in the garden and I really do focus on the detail, you do feel connected to it, and you lose that in modern life. You lose that connection you have with nature.
In episode 87, I speak with Dr Amir Khan, General Practitioner, best-selling author, nature enthusiast, and ambassador for the Wildlife Trusts. Welcome to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Suzy Buttress. As a casual birder, I take time to watch birds as I go about my daily tasks. In my show, I'll tell you about the wild birds I've seen, speak with other enthusiasts, take bird walks, and share stories from listeners around the world. I first came across Dr Amir Khan last summer when watching the Self-Isolating Bird Club web series presented by Chris Packham and Megan McCubbin. Amir presented a segment recorded in his garden and talked about the benefits of nature on mental health. His enthusiasm and sheer joy when speaking about the birds and animals that visited made me selfishly want to speak to him for my show, and I was delighted when he agreed to do so. I started following his Instagram account that very day, and his posts and short films about nature have brought me joy ever since. I later found out that Amir is a very well-known and popular GP, General Practitioner, having appeared a few years ago on a television show, GPs Behind Closed Doors. He's a regular guest medical expert on morning television shows such as Lorraine and Good Morning Britain. Amir is a practicing general practitioner, a GP trainer, and serves on several advisory boards. He takes his medical responsibilities extremely seriously, and during the current pandemic, he has used his knowledge and his influence to help educate us all about the virus and the vaccines available. Last year, Amir's book was published, The Doctor Will See You Now, The Highs and Lows of My Life as an NHS GP. It was featured on the Sunday Times bestseller list, and the paperback edition is due out later this year. A note about the interview. I spoke with Amir in September 2020, after we had left controlled lockdowns relating to the pandemic, and those previous restrictions are spoken of in the past tense. At the time of the release of this episode in February 2021, the UK is back in lockdown. A content warning that, relevant to discussion about Amir's profession as a general practitioner, there are some references to the death of patients due to the pandemic. Amir, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. It's lovely to speak with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm actually a fan of the show, so I'm really excited to be on it.
Oh, that's so kind. Oh, thank you. I first saw you on Chris Packham's Self-Isolating Bird Club. They've been doing a wildlife show, which has been absolutely amazing, covered so many aspects of sort of UK and worldwide wildlife. You did a short film from your garden talking all about your love of your garden, your interest in nature, and your enthusiasm and your sort of sunshine nature. It really came through, and you had such delight in the things you were showing us from in your garden. And you mentioned the birds that you were seeing, of course, which made me prick up my ears. Can you tell me a little bit about when your interest in the natural world began?
Yeah, so I feel like I've always had an interest in the natural world, but I've never really been able to realise it. So I grew up in inner city Bradford, and we were a working class family. My mum was a cleaner, my dad was a bus driver, and we lived in a terraced house, and we had nothing of a garden. So all the wildlife I really came across was on the TV, and me and my dad's passed away now, but me and my dad used to watch that when I was younger, and that was the thing that really connected the two of us. My dad got really poorly with his heart when I was very young. And so we used to go out for walks in woodlands and parks, but he couldn't do that for after he got sick. So I used to go with my friends or on my own, and I used to come back and tell him what I'd seen, and he was really enthusiastic about it, and I was one of those weird children who if they found like a dead mole or a dead hedgehog would bring it back and be really excited about it, and just fascinated with all of that. And I think that kind of was part of why I wanted to do medicine, because I was so interested in anatomy, but the natural world. And it wasn't until I went to university and I felt like I maybe disconnected from it a little bit then, and through working in hospitals and all the busyness of being a junior doctor. And it wasn't until really probably about maybe 10 years ago when I bought my first house with an actual garden. I was so excited to have an actual garden, because growing up, we never really did. And I just thought, I am going to make this into a really wildlife friendly garden. And I think now, whenever I see anything in the garden, I just feel so lucky, because I didn't have that growing up, and there'll be loads of children, loads of adults who don't have that. So I am constantly reminded by how lucky I am whenever I see a finch or any kind of anything in the garden. Honestly, I get excited about the smallest things.
I've been looking through your Instagram account, and your photos really do, especially your garden selection. You clearly are looking at detail, but then taking in the whole as well. And your absolute joy in it really shines through. You mentioned there about feeling lucky about having your garden. And of course, this year has been really challenging for everyone. A lot of people didn't have access to outside spaces. Do you have a feeling about whether people have actually been taking to nature a bit more?
Absolutely. It's been clear from speaking to my patients, seeing when I go to nursing homes. We were lucky, in some way during the pandemic, that we had spells of good weather. And when I went to nursing homes, and it was a horrible place to go and visit, because there were huge numbers of people getting sick with COVID and sadly dying from COVID. But when I spoke to the staff, they were saying, the best place for these people to be is outdoor. And they had little gardens within the nursing homes that the residents would spend time with. And you could see an improvement in their mood. And even because what we know about nature is it does have healing properties, from a medical point of view, purely scientific. I get excited about lots of things, but certainly the science behind it, it is very, very clear that that nature has healing properties, and it can help, alongside conventional medical therapy, to heal people and make them better. And one of the things that I noticed, particularly my elderly patients and those with dementia, was that they weren't getting the visits from family that they were used to. They weren't being engaged in conversations in the ways that they used to. And that has a really detrimental effect on particularly things like dementia. So for them to be able to go outdoors and engage with nature it's been proven to slow it down in scientific studies, but I saw that firsthand during the pandemic. It was a savior for a lot of my patients, and it was a savior for me as well. I've got to say, I saw some terrible things during the pandemic. I was seeing patients dying in higher numbers than I've ever come across before. And speaking to family members about that was, it was real emotional work. So coming back from that and being able to spend some time in the garden and see nature, it was the only time that I actually really stopped thinking about it. That was the only time. I'd go to bed thinking about it. I'd wake up thinking about it. So those were the only times where I was able to not do that.
Can you tell me a little bit about what it is about nature that affects you? What is it that you're perceiving? What is it that happens to you when you are out in your garden?
I'm immediately happy when I'm out in the garden. Actually, when I come home from work, I kind of bypass the house and go round the back into the garden as a first port of call. The first thing I do is check the bird feeders, because I don't want any of the birds getting cross with me for having empty feeders. There's nothing worse, isn't it, than getting that look from the birds in the trees going, where is my food? So that's the first thing I have to do. And they've been busy. They are almost always empty, even though I fill them up every day. But when I go out, I just immediately feel connected to nature. I immediately feel connected to the plants, and just the busyness of all the insects that are in the garden. Just watching them kind of go about their business, it just calms you down immediately. It melts away some of those worries that you've had at work. And yeah, those concerns that from work and family are all very real, but it just gives you that moment to pause, be mindful in that moment. And I'll be honest, Suzy, I was skeptical about mindfulness and all of this. I was like, oh God, who's got time for that? But when I'm in the garden and I really do focus on the detail, like you mentioned, you do feel connected to it, and you lose that in modern life. You lose that connection you have with nature. And yes, my garden is wildlife friendly, and I've made a point of doing all of that, but it's still a pretty garden. I think it's important to get that balance of kind of having a lovely, pretty garden which is enjoyable to look at, but at the same time is friendly to wildlife. And we've been really lucky this year. We've had families of hedgehogs come in. We had our first badger come in. So
wow.
I know that literally I'm still like living off that moment. It was like months ago.
Dug up your garden, did it?
Yeah, it just kind of made a lot of noise. And then someone told me that they like almonds. So I put loads of almonds out, but it never came back, sorry.
But you saw it. So what happened? You just heard lots of noise and then...
Yeah, because we sometimes do go out to see the hedgehogs. And the hedgehogs are fairly... They don't mind us as if we keep a safe distance. So we and they're noisy as well, aren't they?
Oh,
so yeah, they're really noisy, particularly if they're eating. So I just thought, God, we must have loads of hedgehogs because it is so noisy. But when we went to have a look, it was a badger, and it stuck around for about 30 seconds, and then it just made its way out again. But it wasn't particularly bothered by our presence, which was really interesting, because normally I see them when I go out for a run or something like that, and all you ever see is like just their behinds as they disappear into yeah. So yeah. It was lovely to see a whole badger for a change.
That is awesome. Now, your hedgehogs, I have to ask you, because we've got a very healthy hedgehog population in our garden. I'm very, very pleased to say. We have a hedgehog highway through the garden, and they absolutely use it. So how many hedgehogs have you got visiting? Have you got them there at the moment? I mean, not right this moment, but...
Well, yeah, no, they are still here. I mean, and we probably, at any one time I've seen 6. So we had a mum and a dad, and we had 4 babies, and all 4 babies survived. So I was really pleased about that. And and they keep, and that this mum, I mean, we've got names for them. We call the mum and dad Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennett, but...
Fantastic.
So and we know who's who, because the dad is bigger than the mum, and he's got his bit of funny white patch on the back of him. So we know who he, and they've been coming. We've been in this house for a number of years now, and Mr. Darcy in particular. I mean, he might bring back a different wife each year. I don't know, but he comes every year. It's great.
Fantastic! Yes, because we've got 5 or 6. They've been coming more frequently. We only had one that I noticed a couple of weeks ago, but then in the last week, the multiples are coming in, and yeah, it's wonderful to think, oh gosh, this is all going on out there, and you can hear them crunching away at the
and it's so impressive. I mean, you learn so much, because I am not a wildlife expert, I'm a wildlife enthusiast, so you learn so much just by kind of observing things, and they are so fast, aren't they, hedgehogs? Things
yes.
That kind of just bumble around when they want to. They can really peg it.
Absolutely. Yes, it's quite a shock. I know this is a bird podcast, but the hedgehogs have been providing such a lot of entertainment.
Yeah. And it's all interconnected, isn't it? The birds and the hedgehogs and the badgers, it's all in and us.
Absolutely. And knowing that they, are in decline, and that, I'm so honoured that they're using my garden, and hoping that, other people are leaving gaps in their fences and hedges to allow the hogs to roam, because they need that space. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted there because you started talking about badgers and hedgehogs. I know that you've been developing your garden. Actually, first of all, let me go back. When you first got your house and you got your first garden, you didn't have any gardening experience, but you clearly must have launched yourself into creating a garden. But have you taught yourself? Have you developed your garden yourself, or did you have outside help?
No, it's all me, and I want to say, it's perfect, it's beautiful, but it's trial and error, and I only really photograph my successes and the beautiful plants that are doing well. But I've had an equal number of plants that haven't done so well and died away, and so I'm a very much a novice gardener. I read books about it, I do, and I kind of learn the names of plants and what kind of soil they need. But even that's like a different language to me in a way. It's all new information, and I think gardening can sometimes certainly feel a bit daunting. And when you've got a space that you want to transform, and you've got you've got it in your mind's eye, it can be and you're doing it on your own, and you've never done it before. It can be a scary experience. But honestly, it's just trial and error. And I've spoken to experienced gardeners thinking, they must get it right every time, first time, but they don't either. So I felt like I was in good company. So
Absolutely.
it's like 50-50 survival rate for my plants.
No, and it's that trial and error, isn't it? And some years a plant will do really well, and in other years it won't. So it's not even just what you've planted and where; it's what the weather conditions are like, and if you get any disease on them or whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm very impressed that you are honest enough to say that you're a hopeful gardener. You keep trying new things, but you're obviously an expert Instagrammer because you've learned to show the good stuff. But when you go back and have a look, it is nice to see those successes. Now, I know that you had frogs in your pond this year. Was that the first time you'd had that?
No, so I dug that pond out about 2.5 years. No, not even that. 2 years ago, I would say I dug that pond out, and again, it was just to attract wildlife. That was the whole idea of it. And I remember I dug it out in October, and in February we had frogs come into it. They didn't mate that year. They just kind of hung out. And then in the summer, we had more come in. And this year we've had newts as well, which has just been incredible. So we're really lucky with that pond. What I actually want, but I haven't got yet, but what I'm hoping for is dragonflies. That is what I want more than anything. I'm happy with the frogs. I'm happy with the newts, but I'm hoping for dragonflies next year.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. I thought you were going to say you were hoping for a heron, but I'm not sure if the frogs might be in danger with the heron turning up.
The pond has kind of taken a life of its own now. It's turned into one of those ponds that you can't actually see unless you go right up to it, because it's just I filled it with plants, which is what I always do, thinking 50% of them will die, 50% will survive. But actually, I had a really good success rate. So it's full of plants and it seems to be really good for the frogs there, because they've got little kind of different levels for them to hang out on and sunbathe. When the sun comes out, that's you see loads of frogs around that pond, because they just come out onto the edges of it and just sunbathe all day long. It's great.
I've seen the pictures and saw the little bit of video, and it absolutely looks gorgeous. Tell me about your birds. So what birds did you start attracting to your garden?
So the birds are my piece de resistance. So I built a big wooden structure it's kind of an L-shaped wooden structure, and I've hung loads of different bird feeders on it. And again, it was trial and error to see what food they liked. And by far the most popular food for all of the bird types was sunflower hearts. So the vast majority of them are filled with sunflower hearts, but there are some Niger seeds and peanuts as well. We're really lucky where we live in that there's a strip of, it's not far from a busy main road. So I don't live in the middle of nowhere, even though we are semi-rural, but there's a big road that runs through the fields at the back of my house. So this is not me saying I live in this gorgeous area, but we are lucky that we've got a strip of kind of land on one side of our house that isn't being used. So it's just full of trees and bramble and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's where they all seem to congregate. And so we get every type of finch. So we get goldfinches and greenfinches and bullfinches. We've had siskins this year as well, which has just been amazing. Siskins they're a funny bird actually, because we had siskins. They come early in the year around February time, and they are the kind of the most tolerant of the birds that we have. So we can go fairly close to them before they'll fly away. And they were just gorgeous. And we've had woodpeckers on the feeders as well. And we're really, again, lucky where I live in Leeds. There's a red kite breeding program not far away. So we get lots of red kites flying overhead as well. And then we get the ground feeders, robins and blackbirds, lots of wood pigeons and doves, and blue tits, coal tits, great tits. We had great tits nesting in our post box this year, which was a surprise to me because I went to get the mail, and I'm terrible. We've got a post box at the end of our front drive, and because we've got an electric gate, it's on the other side of that, so you have to kind of unlock it and open it and get the post out. And I'm so lazy. I go out maybe once every 3 weeks or something. So I went out and I opened it up, and then I quickly just shut it again because there was a nest. There was no adult in it when I first looked in it, and there were 7 eggs.
Oh my gosh!
So I know, it was incredible. I've got great photos of them, and then I went back a bit later and I just opened up the top of it rather than, and there was a great tit sitting on the eggs. And it did this thing, which I'd never seen before, but I've looked it up and apparently it's common. It fanned out its tail feather when I opened up the postbox, so in a kind of protective way. And it was incredible. And then I never went near that postbox again.
I guess you spoke to your post person, but I was going to say, what an amazing way to say, oh, couldn't pay that bill.
Yes.
It wasn't the dog ate it, it was a great tit nested on it. Because you do hear about robins nesting in watering cans and things like that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, my poor postman had to deliver all our mail to our neighbours, who were really accommodating. So he was fine with it.
And it's only for a few weeks, isn't it? And it gives them an opportunity to hatch and fledge. So tell me then, you have all these wonderful birds and you're having bullfinches, which I don't get as regularly anymore in my garden. Hopefully they'll come back at some point. And you have woodpeckers, which I would love to have. Do you have nuthatches or anything like that?
No, I don't have nuthatches. My sister has a few nuthatches on in her garden, which I'm very jealous of. And we have like a bit of a top trumps on our family WhatsApp group where we send each other pictures of the birds in our garden. And I'm like, yeah, I've got a woodpecker. What have you got? And
I love it.
She's like, I've got a nuthatch. I'm like, no. So yeah, and she gets woodpeckers as well. So she's lucky. The woodpecker, I mean, it's a recent visitor to our garden now, but it is an extremely shy bird. I have to be 100% still. If I move just an inch, and this is from indoors when I'm looking at it through the window, it will be off and it won't come back for days. So it's and I only discovered the woodpecker because I've got a really big nut feeding station. And I was filling it up, and normally it takes a long time it's usually the blue tits and the great tits that feed off that one, and it takes a long time for them to get through it. And I was thinking, God, I must have the squirrels going for this one because I'm filling it up all the time. But it was a woodpecker. All my feeders are squirrel proof. They're called squirrel buster feeders. So if a squirrel tries to get it, it's weighted, so it will close automatically if anything bigger than a small bird goes on it. So, but we do have squirrels trying their best to get into them.
They're plotting in the background.
I've tried to reason with the squirrels. I have got a separate side of the garden where I put food out for squirrels, but they still insist on coming to this bit. It's the same food. I don't understand why they're not listening to me.
It's their rules. That's the thing.
Yes.
They don't bend to yours.
No.
So it's the great spotted woodpecker that you're getting in your garden.
It is. Yeah. And we have had a green woodpecker as well, but that was only a one-off, and it was pecking at the lawn. So I presume it was looking for worms.
Yeah, they eat ants as well, don't they?
Yes.
I keep thinking every time we have times in the summer when ants leave the nests, I was thinking, oh, is there a green woodpecker in the area that might... But I don't live close enough to habitat for green woodpeckers.
Yeah,
I think your garden sounds like the sort of garden I would love to be living with.
Come and visit. Honestly, it is so nice. We just have a cup of tea when it's safe to do so. Come up and visit. Honestly, you just have to sit in our snug, and it overlooks the bird feeding station. And it's my office now, actually. So since we're doing a bit more remote working, I've transferred this into my office, and I'll tell you a story actually. So when we remote work sometimes as GPs, and one of the things we do, we have video consultations to a patient. And I was on the phone to a patient, and I was doing a video consultation, and I was like, okay, show me this rash. And I had the French doors open to the garden because it was a really hot day. And at that time, it was early spring. And we had been kind of overrun with starling chicks. There was just loads of them, and they were really eating the suet coconut halves that we put out.
Yes.
And I was watching them, but also talking to this patient, and he was looking at me, and I was looking at him. And then this starling chick flew into the room, and it did that thing where it panics and kind of flies around and around in circles and then into the window. And I was on the phone to this patient who could see it all happening. I was like, okay, I'm just going to try and to direct this starling out of the room, and I was chasing it around and shutting all the doors so it wouldn't go into other rooms, and he was just watching me. This poor patient had to watch me, and I fell over the sofa trying to chase this starling out. And eventually I did get it out, and then I sat down and I went, right, so tell me about this rash. Like as if nothing had happened. He was like, I think it might be you who needs to see a doctor.
Oh, how wonderful. And there was no charge for that, I assume.
There was no charge.
He got free view of that wonderful view.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, gosh. Just, I can imagine the just trying to make sure it doesn't get into another room and doesn't hurt itself. And
yeah, you just have to go around the house going, close all the doors.
But being aware that you're on camera at the same time.
Yes. Yes. I think I had to let my guard slip for a moment there.
Now, you mentioned that you're a wildlife ambassador or an ambassador for the Wildlife Trust. So what does that mean?
So I do a lot of work with the Wildlife Trust. Mostly it's around the health benefits of nature. But the reason I agreed to be an ambassador was the Wildlife Trust do an amazing job in conservation. But one of the things that I wanted to do was improve access to nature to people from poorer backgrounds, and also people from ethnic backgrounds as well. I'm a South Asian man. I come from a very working class background. I'm lucky. I've got a job now which allows me to live in an area which is gorgeous and attracts wildlife. But there's many people who don't have that, and I can just imagine, like I say, when I was younger, we didn't have access to it, and there'll be loads of kids who love nature. Or may love nature if they had access to it, who don't. So my role as an ambassador for the Wildlife Trust is to talk about the health benefits of nature and the science behind that, and we are pushing the NHS, and they really are coming with us on this about green prescribing, which is great for mental health and a lot of physical health conditions as well. But also I go into schools, and we try and encourage schools to conserve parts of their play areas for nature, so children can learn about it that way. And like I say, mainly kind of inner city schools is where my interest lies. And I think it's important for children from certain backgrounds. If I tell them, look, my dad was a bus driver, same as your dad, and this is so important that they see someone that they relate to, and also people who look a bit like them as well. So when I work in Bradford, and there's a big South Asian community there, and so if they see me engaging with nature and talking about the benefits of it and being enthusiastic about it, and they see someone who looks like them, I think that is so key to getting them interested in it. And once they're interested in it, they'll help conserve it, and that's the cycle that we try and encourage.
I've been speaking to so many people, and this year in particular, people have related their experiences about feeling disenfranchised from nature, even though they have an interest in it, because they didn't see anyone like themselves in nature. And so it just felt alienating to them. Yeah. So to be able to bring people along with you and to fire them up with your enthusiasm, but then give them the spark so they can then perpetuate it. That's just an amazing thing to do. Yeah,
and when I go out with them into the playground area, into the small areas that they have where they've got some wildlife, and they're just so there's a hedgehog actually walking past my window right now.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
I need to just peek out mine just to see if I've got anything out there at the moment.
It's just a little one. Oh, he's adorable. Oh. So you should join our family top trumps, because you did a bit of top trumps there. You were like, I'm going to see if mine are out.
Exactly. Have I got the big one out there? I'm not competitive at all.
To our family. I'm distracted by the hedgehog.
I actually shut my curtains so I couldn't see out, because I knew that if I could see anything, I'd just be distracted. But if you tell me that you've got 6 walking past, I'll have to leave and rush outside myself.
And I think it's worth saying at this point, actually, it's just the one hedgehog, and he's sniffing around the bird feeders. But what's really important, I talked about sunflower hearts, but I meticulously clean up the fallen seed, because sunflower hearts and a lot of bird seeds are dangerous to hedgehogs. So it's important that all gets cleaned out. And I do put hedgehog specific food out for them, mainly just meat, dog food or cat food. But it's so important that they don't eat the bird food, because it's really bad for their bones and can make them really poorly.
Right. Well, that's really important to say that, because I wasn't aware of that last year or the year before, and I had put some out because I just had sunflower seeds on hand, and it ate them. So I thought that was okay. But I was told then, don't let them eat the seed. And so at the moment we've been putting out the crunchy kitten food.
Oh, yes.
And I have got some sachets of wet food as well. They don't seem to be as keen on that. And I'm certainly not as keen on that, because if you don't eat it, you get the flies the next day. So
you get the flies the next day, and then you also get kind of crows and that kind of thing coming in, and magpies, which are fine, I like, but they're not, the little birds don't seem to like it when the magpies and the crows are around. So yeah, I do put wet food out for them. He's eating it right now, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The dry food is much more hygienic.
Much easier for me to handle as well. Well, also there's obviously a cat in the neighbourhood, I think, because we've caught it on our trail cam a few times, taken advantage of the cat nibbles that are out there.
We have that as well.
But yeah, I don't mind too much about the corvids because we don't tend to have crows in the garden. We have rooks and jackdaws that have been visiting, and we do get magpies as well. The magpies, the smaller birds aren't happy about the magpies, but the rooks and jackdaws, the smaller birds seem to be fine with those.
Yeah, that's right.
Carrion crows, even the rooks don't like the carrion crows, and we'll sort of scarper if a carrion crow turns up.
I was going to tell you actually, with a sparrowhawk recently, which is why our bird feeders are a bit like a ghost town at the moment, and it's a male sparrow. So it comes in cycles, the sparrowhawks in our garden. So we understand why it would come, because there's plenty of food for it. So every kind of 6 months or so, a sparrowhawk will arrive, and it will feast on the finches, which sounds awful, but it does. And it's kind of fascinating because you think, wow, it's such a beautiful bird, and the way it hunts is incredible. And you can see it hiding, and then you can see it from start to finish, the hunt. And then obviously the birds pick up on it, and they will disappear for a bit. And we've got a male one currently which hides in one of the trees, and they'll last about 2 weeks, because after about 2 weeks they give up because they think, oh well, all the birds have gone, and then the finches will arrive, and this cycle repeats itself every 6 months. So we have got a sparrowhawk. Last time it was a female who was gorgeous. She was huge. This time it's a small male. So yeah, we've got that as well.
Oh, how wonderful! Do you have owls in your trees?
I have recently discovered a barn owl that flies past our garden in the evening, around the kind of early evenings.
If you tell me it looks in while you're sitting there.
The only reason I saw it is because I startled it, and it flew away, and then I've seen it 2 more times since then. Again, it's on my Instagram. I filmed it. I managed to catch it, and it flew away. It was just incredible, really incredible.
I'm going to check that out afterwards. I missed that particular one, so I'll go back and have a look. I had a close encounter with a barn owl myself last year. We were staying in a little cottage in Arundel, and one came and landed sort of within about 6 to 8 feet of me.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was it was that half light, so I wasn't sure whether it was an owl or not. And then all of a sudden it landed on the post in front of me, and just it was only probably there for about 10 seconds, but that 10 seconds lasted like an eternity, looking at the
I live for those moments. It's so magical.
Absolutely. But you get to have the opportunity a bit more often with it flying past. So
it's only happened 3 times. I'm bigging it up a bit too much. It's happened 3 times in my entire life.
Well, I keep my fingers crossed for you that you see it more frequently. So we've mentioned your Instagram feed, which I urge everyone to go and check out. Now, you've recently released a book. I know that's not on nature, but do you want to tell us about your book? Oh, yes, thank you.
So my book is called The Doctor Will See You Now, and it's kind of my account of the last 15 years of being a GP and being a junior doctor in the NHS, and kind of some of it, because you get this kind of access all area cards almost to people's lives as a GP. They'll tell you things that they wouldn't tell anyone else. And also, there's a bit of a misconception that the doctors in the hospital get to see all the drama and that's a much sexier job. But actually, we get our fair share of drama as well in general practice. So I kind of talk about all of that. And I do talk a little bit about nature, particularly around the chapter when it comes to the pandemic. And I talked about how I went into a nursing home, and unfortunately a patient was dying from coronavirus. And I came out and I was very, very upset. And because this patient was otherwise healthy and well, and unfortunately contracted this virus and was now really, his last days of life. And I came out and I was very upset, and I was thinking about how I was going to call his wife and talk to her. And I was, the only thing that really brought me out my thoughts was a robin that landed on my car bonnet and then disappeared into a hedge and then kept flying back and forth. And I realized it was building a nest in there. And I watched it for about 10 minutes. And it was during that time that I really just forgot about what I was dealing with, and it calmed me down enough to be able to make that phone call to that patient's wife. So I do talk a little bit about nature and the garden and that kind of thing. And so that was a really important moment for me.
There are moments that we can enjoy in amongst the difficult times. And it's that kind of feeds us, isn't it? It's that keeps us thinking about the cycles that are going on in nature that go on outside of us. Yeah. Which is, I think, part of how it helps us to remain centred, because
Definitely.
we realise there are cycles that still go on. Yeah. And sometimes we need to think about that. I feel like there's so much more I could talk to you about, and I really hope that I could speak to you again in perhaps in a few months' time and just see how your winter garden is coming along.
I would love that. In the winter, we get loads of goldfinches. They seem to flock to our garden. So yes, I would love to talk about that.
All right. We'll have to have a little count up about how many goldfinches you're getting in your garden.
It's on. It's on.
I really enjoyed speaking with Amir. His energy and passion for nature is so uplifting, and I really look forward to speaking with him again. Do follow him on Instagram. You can find his account at Dr Amir Khan, and on Twitter he's on Dr Amir Khan GP. Both of these links are in the show notes. Do let me know what birds you've seen recently. You know that I love to hear about them. You can tell me about your sightings by leaving me a message on SpeakPipe or on the contact form on my website, casualbirder.com. And do sign up for my newsletter, Casual Birder Weekly. Links to all of these are in the episode notes. Personal recommendation has been shown to be the number one way that people find out about podcasts. If you enjoy this show, please tell a friend or give the show a shout out on social media. You can also help support the show's production by buying me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com. Your donations help fund my production costs and are really appreciated. Make sure you don't miss any episodes by subscribing to the show. Subscribing is free and you can do it wherever you listen. Thank you to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by The Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast.